Hello, this is Klein, and I want to take you on a little bit of a journey into your mind. I want to talk to you about some things that are significant issues that we all must deal with or should be aware of, that we should be dealing with if we want to progress in our development as a human being, as we want to move forward as a person that is progressing in their mental development. And it's something that is basically, like I said, fundamental in our understanding of our existence. Actually, the whole reality of this is laced throughout the Bible, but unfortunately, it's not something that we often hear in traditional churches anymore. It's kind of gone by the wayside, and it's dealing with spiritual matters that are critical to our development. And something I want to bring to your attention, we cover in greater detail in our Angle Vision series, but as a precursor to the Angle Vision series, I want to talk about this thing that has to do with strongholds. Now, strongholds are mentioned in the book of Corinthians, the second book, 10th chapter. Paul's talking about it. He's trying to implore the people to pay attention to the fact that they have problems. Everybody alive has problems that are strongholds. These are basically things that we hold to. They could be sin. I don't really care for that word too much. I'm just talking about a word that has become almost passé. It's almost like a cliche. It doesn't really have any power anymore. But basically, sin means to be out of alignment with God. And who can't admit to the fact that they're not, or they are hindered in their alignment with God? We are on a planet. We live in these bodies, and these bodies are not prone towards leaning towards God. They actually lean away from God. They spin away from God. They're in a contradiction to God. And so, because we live in these bodies, and Paul says, I live in the flesh, but I don't walk according to the flesh. And he's saying, I still live in this body, but I want you to know that my consciousness is informed by what my body primarily reports to my mind. There's another way of thinking, another way of looking at things that isn't based upon what you see with your eyes, or hear with your ears, or smell, or touch, or feel, or taste. There's another way of forming your consciousness that isn't through the human gates into your mind. And he's saying, I don't live that way. I walk differently. And God's trying to get us to walk differently, living according to the Spirit as opposed to living according to the flesh. And as we're born into this world, we begin to formulate all kinds of concepts, things that our parents teach us, things that we learn in school, just things that we figure out on our own through the physical gates. And he's saying that these gates often create for us strongholds, things that just aren't true, but we believe to be true, but nonetheless are false. And he's trying to tell us here, not only in Corinthians 10, but also later, or in Ephesians, which was written after Corinthians, in the sixth chapter, it talks about this kind of spiritual war going on. There's a spiritual war going on, and it talks about weapons of warfare, spiritual warfare, that we have to enter into if we expect to progress. Now, what are these strongholds more exactly? Well, strongholds can come from a lot of places and be a lot of things. But they're not necessarily from one place, not necessarily from just living in the world. The things that can be taught to you, experiences that you can enter into that at one time were blessings but end up turning into strongholds. That's an interesting problem. I can think of a couple of ways to illustrate that, one of which comes from the Old Testament, when you see the Israelites having to go up to Egypt because there was no food in the land. They were forced to leave where they lived because there just simply wasn't any food. So they went to Egypt along the Nile. There was plenty of food, and they lived up there. They prospered. Their numbers grew, and they were blessed. They had a place of abundant living. And yet, after a while, things turned around on them, and they became slaves. So what started out as a blessing became a slavery. It became a stronghold. Eventually, God had to send in a deliverer whose name was Moses, and he took them out of that place into a whole nother experience, which was a wilderness wandering. And there they had to de-learn what it was to be a slave, to have a slave mentality. And it took 40 years to wear off the slave mentality. In fact, some of the people never got rid of it. They had to die, and their children were the ones that inherited the promised land, which was Israel. So a lot of things that we enter into, which are blessings, can turn around and be a curse, or a bondage, or a stronghold. I can think of my old church that I used to go to. Now, I've been a Christian for 40 years, but when I first got started, many things were taught to us in that church. There was a great freedom of worship. There was a great teacher, innovative songs that weren't necessarily out of an old hymn book, and there was new life in that place. And after a period of time, it turned around, and what was life and light became a place of bondage. And the people that continued to stay in that place are continuing now to function because they're in a stronghold that has turned into a bondage. And so things that can start out as blessings can reverse and turn into a bondage. I look at our own country, and the freedoms that we had are now being restricted. I heard just yesterday these kids opened up a lemonade stand, and they were shut down by the police. And the lemonade stand was on their own front lawn. You know how kids make lemonade stands. Maybe you made a lemonade stand when you were a kid. And the police came and said, you can't have this lemonade stand because it's against the law. You have to have these 3 different licenses to have your lemonade stand. And so this land of freedom is turning into a land of oppression. We're watching it before our very eyes turn on us. And so things that start out as blessings can end up being strongholds. And Paul's trying to talk about these things in 2 Corinthians 10, that they exist in your mind and they need to be pulled down. Now, most of the time we don't think about functioning in strongholds in the way we think. But we can be in that stronghold and circle and circle and circle, round and round and round and round, in habits, wrong beliefs, particular types of besetting, what the Bible calls besetting sins, that keep you in bondage. And it takes the truth to bring down those strongholds. So we need to be aware of the fact that we may have strongholds if we're going to seek to have them pulled down. If you're a seeker of the truth and you have a love for the truth, then you want to be confronted, and I don't like, that's a hard word, but you want to know if you have strongholds or not, or which ones you're functioning, which you may think are true. If you're a lover of the truth, then you may be somebody that's functioning in a dogma or a doctrine of the church that you believe to be so, but it isn't so, and yet you function in it. One of the most amazing teachings of the last 200 years is a teaching about the rapture. And we've just had a man, this camping, who functioned in this idea that there was this pre-tribulation rapture, and told everybody the day and the hour, and people were functioning in these beliefs of this man, and they were nothing more than a stronghold. And they sold their property and they moved around, only to find out that, oh my gosh, we've been functioning in a stronghold and we didn't even know it. So a lot of times good people can be functioning in a stronghold and not even know it. And the first step to mental sanity is to realize that you have strongholds. You might say to yourself, oh, I know the Bible and I know the truth and I'm set free and I don't have any strongholds. I guarantee you, you have strongholds, because we all do. I know for a fact in the last couple of weeks that I've been functioning in an area of teaching or understanding or what I believe to be true, only to find out that most all people believe the same way I did concerning this item, and I've come to find out that it's not true. How do I know it's true? That it's not true? Because I started doing some study on this, and as I investigated, I found out the facts. And the facts don't support what was commonly held, or what I commonly held to be true. So if you're somebody that is seeking the truth, now listen, you have to seek the truth. It doesn't seek you. You have to seek it. It's not going to just come to you. You know, somebody may say something to you out of out of the world, out of the environment out there, and it might strike a chord in you. But if you don't pursue that and think, well, you know what, they said something that really caught my attention. I think I'm going to look into that matter. But you have to look into it to really convince yourself that it's on course or not. So if you're going to be a person that progresses in their experience, and you say, well, I'm a Muslim or I'm a Hindu, like, are you sure you're not functioning in a stronghold? Have you really investigated why you've accepted this or what it is that you've accepted? Have you really dug into it to find out if you're into the truth or not? Or you've just blindly accepted what the masses in your culture have told you? Same thing in Christian culture. Are you sure what you've been taught is the truth? Or is it just a dogma that's become a doctrine that's common and you've bought into it and this is what you believe simply because somebody else told you? But if you really want to grow, then you have to put on the mind of Christ. That means you have to become a seeker. And if you're not a seeker, then I guarantee you're a person that's controlled by strongholds, mind circuits that just go round and round and round, like the Israelites when they were in the wilderness. 40 years they circled round and round and round because they had a slave mentality and they didn't want to break out of it. They didn't want to get into what was promised to them. They didn't have the courage. They didn't have the faith to press on. But I'm telling you that if you are a real, legitimately honest person, then you'll understand that you have strongholds, and the only way to break out of them is discover what they are when you accept that you have them, and then become a seeker. You have to dig. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it is the glory of kings to search it out. You have to expose yourself to these weapons that Paul's talking about, the weapons of our warfare. He's talking about this spiritual warfare, and that battlefield is your mind, that our weapons of war are strong in pulling down strongholds. The first step is recognizing that you do have strongholds, and the second step is digging, searching, putting on the mind of Christ, which means you have to put off the mind of the flesh, which is a mind that's caught up with strongholds. We all have them. We all need deliverance from them. That doesn't mean you're possessed by the devil. Don't get me wrong. That's ridiculous. But we do have these places within our being that are pockets, strongholds of thought that need to be torn down, and they need to be rebuilt. And it's incumbent upon you to do the work. And you have to put aside all of the recreational pleasures. You have to really be somebody that's interested in seeing these strongholds put down. But if you want to grow, you have to recognize this.